Hello, listeners. Hi, how are you? This is Eve Sturgis, and you are listening to the podcast Everything's Relative with Eve Sturgis, where I find people who have had DNA discoveries and I ask them to talk about it with me. People are finding out more and more these days that they are not who they thought they were. That's the kind of DNA discovery that I'm talking about. So people discover they were adopted and nobody told them. They were donor conceived and nobody told them. They may have come from incidents of infidelity and nobody ever told them, because that was a deep, dark secret. And of course, myriad other reasons and ways, and some of them less pleasant than others. But all of them are stories. All of them affect people in different ways. And that's what this podcast is about. So welcome. Thanks for being here. We are here with Cassandra. And I met Cassandra through a Higher Earth Hope and Healing retreat. She is an active member within the NPE community, and she is especially active and vocal within the donor-conceived population, which she can talk about in a minute. I brought her on here today. I've had her on my whiteboard. I have a whiteboard of a list of all these people that I want to track down and get their stories. And Cassandra has been on my list for a long time. I'm so excited to get to cross her out off my whiteboard. The other thing is that Cassandra is another person who has done NPE Stories, which is Lily Wood's podcast, NPE Stories. Look it up. It probably came up when you found my podcast. It probably came up below, if especially if you're on like Apple Podcasts. It will tell you other podcasts you might be interested in. NPE Stories with Lily Wood. Go find Cassandra's episode, because in that episode, she talks all about her sort of like basic, and I don't mean that in a bad way, like her basic story, like her what happened, how it felt, the step-by-step experience, because I don't want our podcast experiences with Lily and I to be exactly the same. Go listen to Lily's episode to get the backstory of Cassandra. And then she is here right now. Say hi, Cassandra.
Hi.
She is gonna tell us like a synopsis of that, and then if you want all the details, go listen to that. And then otherwise, I want to talk to her about where she's at now and what kind of things have transpired since that episode, how things have been the past couple of years, and what she's doing now as a donor-conceived person in the NPE community. So, hi, Cassandra, welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Eve. I was so glad to see you recently, and actually, speaking of Lily, and you as well, just met Lily in person a couple weeks ago, also at the Higher Earth Hope and Healing retreat. Which was awesome. It was so awesome to see people in real life when you've communicated online and you just see like the little face of people and they're not moving and all of a sudden they're real people, and it's amazing. So definitely go check out Lily's podcast as well. I took a DNA test. Turns out, there was a surprise. I took a DNA test in August of 2017, and it was 23andMe. And when I got my results on September 26th of 2017, I pretty much immediately realized that something was off. I grew up with, my mom is first generation Italian American, and my dad is very much of a mix of British and Dutch and very, very old colonial American settlers kind of thing. And so I looked at my results, and the first thing I saw was 49-point-something% Ashkenazi Jewish. So I immediately realized that there was a bit of a surprise, but it took a few hours to put it together that what I was seeing was an NPE situation where my father was not my father.
Only a few hours is pretty impressive, I have to say.
Yeah. And it's since then I've talked to so many people where, the biological parent was of a similar kind of background to the raising parent. And so it really has taken some people like years really to realize, combing through matches and stuff, that something is amiss. So I'm really fortunate in that way that I realized, oh my gosh, this is something very, very much not what I expected. And it was not explainable.
Not explainable. And did you suspect, like, was there some shadow in the back of your mind that was like, aha? Or did you really were, it was like really, really, really a surprise?
It was really, really, really a surprise. It really was. And I think as a lot of us can kind of attest to, like, you look back and things start to make sense. Like you realize there were clues and there were things that didn't add up about your upbringing or things of that nature, but you never piece it together to be, oh, my dad's not my dad. That would never have like crossed my mind.
No, yeah, no, I relate to that.
Right. Like I said, my dad's mostly of like British colonial background primarily. That was the clue when I had a friend look at my results and was like, you're 0% British. And I was like, oh, I kept I kept looking at my mom's half, the Italian half, and it was like mostly Southern Europe, a little bit of Spain, a little bit of Greece, like a chunk of Middle East, and then there was like 4% French. And I was like convinced that 4% French was my dad, and no, it wasn't. I was 0% British. I remember looking at a picture of my dad when he was young, when he was a kid, and he had blonde hair. I mean, super blonde hair, super blue eyes. And I look nothing like him. I'm dark hair, dark eyes. And
yeah, you're the opposite of that. You're the opposite of that. Yeah.
Right. And really what it came down to was thinking, okay, my mom's Italian. My mom is Southern Italian. That's where I got my coloring from. So it was more of just like, oh, dominant coloration.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. So we never really thought of it. And I kind of have like a long face, and my dad has kind of like a long face. So people would just kind of see the long face and be like, oh yeah, you kind of look like your dad, So yeah, there was not like, even though there were clues like that I can go back to now and point out. And I think I even remember saying to my mom at that moment, wow, I don't look anything like daddy did when he was young. But they were always something that was easily explainable. You could explain it away, or where it was never like an overwhelming urge of like, this can't possibly be. So no, it was a complete shock, complete shock. And so I confronted my mom the next morning after realizing that something was more wrong than I originally thought. Because I really delved into all the possibilities. I was like, maybe my Italian grandfather, he loved his Jewish friends in Brooklyn. Maybe I was part Jewish from his side. And then thinking, oh, my dad did have some relative from Germany. Maybe they were German Jewish,
right.
All these possibilities, and realizing that couldn't possibly be. So after calling 23andMe and saying, is there any chance of a sample mix-up? Which they said absolutely not. I confronted my mom, and she was very honest with me, which I'm very appreciative of. She knew it was coming. She knew I was taking the test.
Oh, she did.
She did. She actually saw me spit into the tube.
Oh.
I remember the look on her face when I was spitting into the tube. I really do. But again, it was nothing I thought of as a red flag at the moment. So so she started crying, and she told me that no, my dad was not my biological father. And I asked her what on earth happened, and she confessed to me that my dad had been infertile. They were unable to conceive, and so they used a sperm donor to conceive me. So from that moment, I was immediately on a mission to figure this out. I really didn't waste a second. So I had a half sibling match, and
oh wow, right away you did?
Right away I did, yeah. Which again, I saw that this half sibling match was also half Ashkenazi Jewish. And my mom had a key piece of information, which I'll share again because it's just so fun. So my mom, I was conceived and born in 1982. So a woman, as they probably still do now for purposes of intrauterine insemination, you would chart your cycle. and let the doctor know when you were ovulating. And so the week that she was ovulating, the procedure was to come in 3 days during that week that she was ovulating and be inseminated 3 times.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Oh, I know.
I didn't even know.
Right?
I didn't even know how that happened. Okay. That makes sense.
So yeah. And so she came in and, she told me, and this is just a few minutes after I found out, when I'm trying to grill her with all these questions, she said that the doctor just kind of nonchalantly, as he was, inseminating her, was like, "Oh, I just drove in from Long Island with this, with this cup of semen that he was now inserting into her." And so I was conceived in Westchester County, New York, which is right over one of the bridges from Long Island, half an hour drive or so. So my mom remembered that, 35 years later, remembered, oh, this semen came from Long Island. It's so weird. And it was so helpful, especially because they had no information. Like, my mom was given absolutely nothing. There was no paperwork, nothing. So she really had no idea who this person was. So, but she had an idea he may be a doctor and maybe from Long Island, which was great. So when I found my half sibling match, I Googled that person's name, and up popped 3 doctors on Long Island with that last name. And it turned out to be, middle brother. So I reached out to my half sibling match and basically just dumped on her, and she confirmed that they had just recently found out that their father had donated sperm. So I was able to connect with my biological family very quickly. She put me in touch with one of her other siblings, one that my bio dad had raised, put me in touch with my bio dad, and he was very glad to start a relationship.
Wow, that's nice. That's cool. That's
yeah.
So cool. That's a cool part of the story.
It is. So within a few weeks of finding out, I had already met one of my siblings. I had begun corresponding with my bio dad after I think it was maybe a month and a half or so after I found out. And within 4 months, I had met my biological father.
Wow.
So it all happened very, very quickly, and which was great in the sense that I don't think I would have been able to wait any longer. I think it would have killed me, but it was also a lot to handle all at once. And so the year, 2 years, 3 years after that were a major spiral into severe PTSD and grappling with everything that had happened. I can finally say I'm in a good place. I want to say, it's something I still think about all the time. It's something I still write about all the time. It's something I still have a lot of feelings about. There's still a lot of anger, still a lot of sadness, still a lot of grief. But I'm okay. I can get through it. I can channel it into something more, something better for me, something better for other people. So yeah, so that's kind of the summary of how it all started.
Cool. Yeah, that was perfect. That was great. You're good at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And do you talk in NPE Stories with Lilywood, do you talk more about that emotional journey? Relationships have been a big part of your story.
Yes.
So which is very interesting and important. And I think your story is also just such an excellent example of how and why this stuff, which seems simple from the outside, is not simple for the people experiencing it.
Right. It's so not simple. And as much as a lot of us can look back and say, okay, there was a really big culture of secrecy around adoption and donor conception, and even for people conceived via affairs, via the so much shame around extramarital sex and things of that nature, that we can put ourselves in our parents' position. But it's it goes to a certain point. Right. Empathize with the time period. But then when you kind of look back and realize everything that went into keeping the secret and how the secret became more important than you, than like your health, then that's where it becomes more difficult to swallow. And so that's kind of how I got into talking to parents. It was really difficult for me to talk to my own parents about this. I want to say my mom was really excellent at providing any answers I needed. And actually at the very beginning being supportive, like really, I want to say like the first year or so, she was really tried. It wasn't without arguments, it wasn't without tears, but she really did try. And then she got tired of being there for me, basically. And my dad, who raised me, is I don't want to say he's a narcissist, but he has some narcissistic qualities, many, substance abuse issues, and there's a lot there. An abusive relationship with my mom, and kind of was able to kind of turn her and turn the rest of the family into thinking that I was the problem and it was all my problem. So it's been a difficult journey in that sense. And that really drove me to be like, okay, if I can't reach my parents, how can I reach somebody where this can actually impact people, impact real living people? And I was like, I can talk to parents, I can talk to other parents. There's less emotions there, and you can catch them earlier in the process. You can change their ways of viewing this, earlier in the process, so that you're not creating this kind of situation 30, 40, 50 years in the future. So that's where I started like honing in some of my advocacy work around donor conception in particular, because it's the thing that makes donor conception so different in a sense, even though we share so many similarities with the general NPE population. Donor conception has this unique aspect where usually both parents are in on it, so to speak, and they go into it, like even before you are conceived, they go into it with the express plan of conceiving a child and then lying to it. So it's like this premeditated conspiracy of sorts. It really feels like that from the inside, because they're creating this whole narrative between the two of them. And it also got me to kind of explore, like, well, what does that do to people's marriages? What does that do to people's just family relationships in general? Because that can't be healthy going into it with that mindset. And I started realizing that, like, looking at my parents' marriage, looking at things about how I had been raised, and being like, oh my gosh, this secret touched on so much more than anyone could ever have imagined. If I put myself in the situation, and I'm a pretty empathetic person. So if I had put myself in this situation prior to it happening to me, thinking about it maybe happening to a friend, I could see understanding that it would be a huge life changer, and understanding how it could be really impactful. But I don't think I could have ever envisioned how much the secret eroded, like, the structure of your family. Like it just permeates everything.
Yeah, I was just getting this visual, this like image of, you can't see my hands right now because we can't have video on, but I'm doing a shape with my hands where it just sort of seeps into everything, like water, or you can't keep water out of, like
exactly,
sort of like spider webs, but like something that roots really. I mean, maybe like tree roots or something. Like it just kind of goes around and touches and is a part of everything.
Yeah. I'm doing the same thing with my hands because I'm Italian and Jewish and from New York, New Jersey. So yes, same thing. It's like all over the place, Yeah. And that's what shocked me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot let this happen in the future. Like I can't let what's happening in my family continue, because I came from such a tight-knit, close Italian immigrant family. You know, my dad's family was very small. It was really just my grandparents. But my mom's family, even though still it wasn't a huge family, but just very tight-knit, very, I mean, I can't even, it's hard to explain. If you're Italian American, you know, you're constantly over at people's houses, constantly just open, you know, it's just such an openness and such a, and I just couldn't let anybody else's beautiful family erode because of a secret like this. So it became like my mission to be like, cautionary tale. This is my cautionary tale. You have to tell your kids. If you've already waited, if your kids are already older, it's so much better if it comes from you rather than if it comes from a DNA test. Like, you know, you have to be honest. And it's so scary. It's so scary. I know it is, but you have to tell your kids from the beginning. And so that's, and also when I found out, my daughter was 19 months old. And so I started having to explain to her what was going on, because she was there for a lot of these discussions. You know, she was just kind of hanging around. And I'm like, oh, I have to talk to her about this. I have, and also as far as medical history, everything, I was like, I don't want this to be another generation of this. And so when I was practicing talking to her about it, I was like, oh, this is how I should have been talked to about it. And so then I just started helping parents would be like, how do I talk to my 1-year-old about it? And I'd be like, hey, I have personal experience with that. I can actually tell you how to talk to a 1-year-old about it. It's really not as hard as a lot of people think. And kids grasp onto it. And I mean, my daughter was talking about it when she was like 2, you know, and now she's 6 and she doesn't care, of course, but now it's like, you know, video games and all My Little Ponies and stuff. And, you know, she has contact with some of her cousins, you know, from my biological family side. And so she knows, you know, I talk to her often about how I have 2 types of dads. Each one did a different thing in helping to make me the person that I am, you know, and then kind of contrasting it to her. Like, she has the one dad who provided the sperm, and he's also the dad who's raising her, you know. But for me, it's just 2 different people who did those things, and mommy loves them both, and they each did something different. So it's really been good to be able to talk these things out with parents who are using donors now, and they'll ask, how do I explain this thing? Or what would you have rather had done? And we're able to kind of share the wisdom, even though a lot of us didn't know growing up, but kind of taking the mistakes of what was done for the last 80 years in donor conception and trying to make it better. And then hopefully the kids 40 years from now will be able to say what worked for them and what didn't work, and we'll just, you know, progress, or science will step in and cure infertility or something.
I hadn't even considered that. That could happen.
It really could. And that's something too that we talk about, especially with adoption and donor conception, is like they're not cures for infertility. You may think, or it may be presented to you as such, but they don't stop making you infertile. And I say that as someone who's dealt with infertility. So it's not that I don't get that. It's just that they're not going to restore that biological connection that is what makes you unable to reproduce, you know, in the traditional, socially acceptable way. And that's where a lot of the weight gets put on donor conceived people or adoptees, is that we're almost expected to be the cure. We're expected to be the finish line, you know, of all that treatment. And it ends up being a big weight on us. The expectations of what we're supposed to be, or how we're supposed to be the solution to.
A solution or an answer.
Yeah, a solution to your grief, you know, and And that's not something that should be placed on any child, but especially when there's other circumstances involved, when there's another biological parent, it ends up making us feel very out of place, because there was another place that we could have been. We could have been raised with a biological parent, and so it becomes like, well, we were taken away from that biological parent in order to fulfill your grief.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really messed up mental game. It's a really difficult existential puzzle to work your way out of.
Good. Yeah, that's actually an excellent description. I was just thinking, like, I was just going in my head, like, it's so complex. It's so complex.
But it was like, holy moly, I am now a living, breathing nature versus nurture experiment, like a planned one, because prior to I want to say, honestly, the 2000s, really. I mean, I can't tell you how insane this is, but there are still doctors who tell you not to tell your kids in 2022, but up until the, 90s, 2000 time, it was still very common to tell parents or to lead parents to believe that not telling your children they were donor conceived was okay. So in the early 80s, very few parents were telling their kids.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was just, right as you were saying that, I was like, I know lots of people growing up. I've talked with a lot of adoptees about how adoption was an open conversation in my world. Growing up, I knew there was lots of kids who were adopted, or it was an open, sort of an open, openly discussed issue. So I'm not familiar with growing up with it as a secret, but I can't identify a single person in my life or time when donor conception has been discussed when I was a child with my peers, and now as an adult.
Yeah.
I can't, that, and it's got to be going on. I know a lot of other adults. I know a lot of couples.
Yes.
So it must be going on.
It was. I mean, and that's the crazy thing, is they're not keeping track. I mean, we're decades behind adoption. And I mean, and you've talked to enough adoptees where they're way behind where they should be also.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of secrecy, still way behind where adoptees are in terms of what therapists know to tell parents. Like, there are probably still well-meaning therapists out there who would tell you, of course you have to tell your kid that they're adopted, but then say, oh, does the kid really need to know if it's only a sperm donor or something?
Yeah, I mean, of course there are always sort of exceptions to the rule, right? Like, there's definitely good people out there in all the situations.
I was trying to figure out how I was this nature versus nurture, like, experiment, like, okay, in the 90s, they were actually planning this out. Like, don't tell your kids, figure it out.
I hate thinking of you as a human, Cassandra, that I know, but also just thinking of children and babies as experiments. Like, that word really shifts the energy of the conversation.
Yes. And that, I think, is really hard to deal with. That, and the money involved is real. Like, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but I've been in very bad places because of those aspects of my conception, very bad mental places, just coming to terms with those aspects of it. And so when I think about the issues I had growing up as a teenager, anxiety, depression, at this point, when we're saying, like, we can't tease out exactly what is nature and nurture, they're intertwined, they affect each other and stuff. And when I think about the mental health struggles of my dad, my dad had a lot of mental health struggles, which I always thought were genetic, but guess what? It turns out my biological father also had numerous mental health struggles. And my mom's side, also a lot of anxiety on that side. So when I put that together and realize I have these three branches that I'm pulling from, either through nature or through nurture or through both, coupled with the impacts of the secret in and of itself and the environment that you're being raised in, where there's this other reality that you don't know about, it makes a lot of sense.
Wow, when you put it that way, it just feels undeniable. Like, of course you were affected.
Yeah, and then
not that anybody's trying to deny it.
No, what it's actually true. That's one of the hardest things about dealing with parents who are using donors, is that a lot of times they really just don't believe what you're saying, or they think it's just because your parents lied to you, which we know from decades and decades of adoptee research, it's not just because you were lied to. There are factors involved in not having mirroring, from genetic, or just having these unanswered questions, even if you do know, that lend themselves to difficulties in certain aspects of identity formation, so it's really hard to get parents to believe things around how important identity is to you. Even parents who are dealing with their own identity struggles, they have a hard time empathizing with this particular identity struggle.
I imagine that a lot of people, because this is such a new topic, and I don't think that this is anything unkind or malicious on the part of parents, but I imagine that, maybe I'm just thinking about myself, that parents, when they hear these kind of stories, these sort of generalized, I don't know what generalizations. I imagine that they think, well, in our family, it won't be like that.
Exactly.
Like, or well, we don't have depression, so that won't be, that triangulation that you just spoke about doesn't apply to us, or whatever. Right. Like you get, and which is kind of the American way, right? It's like, it always comes down to the individual.
Yes.
But
yeah.
But I bet that is an obstacle that parents don't even know they have. It's like an obstacle of
it is
of understanding how common and how similar we all are as people, despite all of our uniqueness as families and parents.
Exactly. And I think parents spend a lot of time, especially parents who are very open with their kids about their conception, spend so much time understanding how much they're normalizing it. And so they're taking away the shame from it. But while they're doing that, they're also not normalizing the child's feelings about their conception.
Right.
So they're trying to take shame away in the public eye, which is awesome, because we want it talked about. We want it to be, I don't want to say normalized, feels like an odd word. It makes it sound like you want everybody to use a donor, which is not, which is not exactly what we want. But, but to understand that this is the way that a lot of families are made. And to not have, kids picking on each other for the ways that we were conceived, because literally we're all conceived, using the same pieces of human anatomy, the same cells and such. So it's
right. I was like, our cells anatomy? Is it anatomy? I guess it's anatomy in the end. I mean, in the beginning, I don't.
Yeah. So it's like, but then the work isn't necessarily being done to understand the child's feelings. It's about, well, my child won't be ashamed of this. My child won't feel this way because they'll know. My child won't. But it's so much about saying that your child won't, that it's like dehumanizing when your child does speak up and have those concerns, and parents aren't preparing themselves for when their child starts asking questions, and some kids don't ask questions, some don't, some go through their teenage years and, they're like, I'm still not interested. But we have parents come in and all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, my 3-year-old is asking these really intense questions. What do I do? It's like, and their 3-year-old is starting to have these like existential questions going on because they know, and they're putting the pieces together and they're trying to figure it out. And they have no idea how to discuss it with kids that age,
right.
or how to provide their children with answers, So we try to help coach parents on how to approach possible DNA testing, how to approach looking for siblings, things like that. So yeah, that's a big thing about what we're trying to do, is normalize kind of fostering connections, and normalize the idea of uncommon and untraditional family structures too.
Mm-hmm. So when you say we and they come to us, who are you talking about? What is the channel that you have found for yourself to be a part of as part of the donor conceived conversation?
Yeah. So I help moderate. There's a crew of us who do an amazing job. The largest group for the entire donor conception triad constellation online. So we've got over 18,000 members at this point. Parents, donors, donor conceived adults, people who are also involved in the industry, therapists, lawyers and surrogacy, all kinds of things. So that is one place where we're available. The kind of advocacy bubble of donor conceived people, and also the newly formed Donor Conceived Council and Donor Conceived Community. Donor Conceived Community does peer support led groups, and we're also trying to bridge the gap with parents to allow for parenting support to kind of check in with donor conceived adults about things like that.
Mm-hmm. So when you say 18,000 people are a member, are they all a part of something? Does it have a name? Is it a club?
It's a Facebook group. It's donor conceived. It's a very long donor conceived people, parents, siblings. I can send you the name of the
Okay. Yeah. Send me the name and so that if anybody, if that applies to somebody, I hope that they can find it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. So you were just really like, you've got your fingers in all the pies.
In everything. And then the other area where I've kind of honed in my trying to help people wade through this experience is the Jewish discovery aspect of this, which because it's got a unique set of, again, existential questions surrounding it. It's like, when you're 35 and you realize, half my family was killed in the Holocaust, and what do you do with that? What do you do with those feelings around it? So that is the other area where I've spent a lot of time trying to reach out to people and help them figure out what it means to them and how to approach Judaism as a culture, as a religion, as an ethnic group, and how to approach it respectfully so that we can learn and then decide what kind of relationship we want going forward with the Jewish people and with the Jewish community.
So that's so important. I think that's just another layer that people barely even touch on when we're just kind of talking broadly about NPE experiences.
Yeah.
That's maybe not true. I think within the groups, there's a lot of discussion about it, especially as each person that has something like that,
like big surprises.
The big surprises, right? The really big surprises. We talk about those within the groups, and there's some subgroups of like ethnic discovery and racial discussions and stuff like that. But I think broadly, and even in this show, I've barely had guests touch on it very much for the really, really big surprises. So
it's huge.
It's huge.
It's huge. And I would say at this point, 4.5 years in, the discovery of being a patrilineal Jew has been just as impactful in my life. It's been just as big of a discovery in and of itself as having a different parent than I thought I did. They've been of equal weight in my discovery. So to me, it feels like two simultaneous and interwoven journeys of equal kind of magnitude. And that's been insane.
That sounds like a lot.
It is. And in a sense, I feel really glad to have had that opportunity because, I think for a lot of us, the new relationships with biological family, like I have a lovely relationship with my bio dad, but of course, there's no manual for all of this. So, there are moments where expectation versus reality is not always, they don't always match up. And it was like, this could also be a way, this has also been a way of being able to connect with my new self and to connect with ancestors, aside from just my biological father or my siblings or cousins or, people that I may never meet or talk to. But this is a way, like, it's a way to honor the grandparents that I never met, or all my great grandparents were all immigrants. All their siblings and cousins and stuff were all, killed in the Holocaust, and at least what I've been able to find. And so it's just, has been a way for me to continue on the legacy of who I am and who I feel I always was, even without necessarily having to have it be about my personal relationship with my biological father. I asked him before, but I finished my conversion last year. And so before I did that, I asked him, I wanted to use his Hebrew name in my Hebrew name. So the way the Hebrew name works is it's, your first name, and then it's son of or daughter of, and then your parents' names in Hebrew. So I asked him, I said, can I use your Hebrew name as, can I be daughter of your Hebrew name? And he gave me his Hebrew name, and, thought it was pretty cool that I was doing that. And so, it's been huge. And so I finally have a sort of legal name where I'm legally his daughter.
Right. That gives you a sense of connection that you may not have otherwise had. I feel like I could talk to you for like 3 more hours. So many questions that I think always later, I mean, this happens with everybody, but every time I find myself so fascinated and just listening and like taking it all in and processing it. And it won't be until much later that I have lots of things to sort of say and lots of questions. And so I hope you don't take my silence as, I don't know what one might think it is, but
No.
This is fascinating. And it's interesting. I've had a few people contact me lately as parents, asking, where to go and what are the resources. And so it's so wonderful that the donor conceived community and the larger NPE community has you. You're doing so much great advocacy and talking. And so because I'm thinking about my friends that just contacted me as parents and said, how do we do this? Where should they go first?
I would also recommend, just because it's easy and it's less overwhelming than joining a huge Facebook community. Even though I do recommend that they join the donor conceived people, parents, siblings. It's all in capital letters. We have a reputation. We're called the all caps group. It can be very overwhelming for people to join it, and so I understand that. So we want people to wade in carefully, but I would also highly recommend following Jana Ruppnow on Instagram. Okay. Her book is Three Makes Baby. She is a therapist who specializes in third-party reproduction. She's also an adoptee and an adoptive mom. So it's a much easier platform to just follow on Instagram for a bit and kind of get used to the nature of her posts. If you're just starting out on trying to figure out how to handle parenting your donor conceived child. And then we can also move on from there. She's open to PMs, DMs, and she can lead you my way too. I can always lead you to our parenting group which is on Facebook, or talk to you one-on-one as well. I'm always open for that. Even if I'm not answering right away, I am available, and we'll get to you, and I'm always willing to kind of help. I remember even shortly after I discovered, I was on the phone with a woman in Australia who had just told her adult daughter, and we were like commiserating about how difficult of a process it was, but like on opposite sides. And it was like refreshing to talk to the other person where it was not your own parent or not your own child.
Yeah, that can feel so good. It can feel so good.
Yeah.
To feel part of a community or feel part of something with another person. And I guess I just want to acknowledge, just in case anybody is listening and is concerned or worried or interested in the differences of conversation and the language used when families are same-sex parents. Cassandra and the donor conceived community are totally inclusive and conversational and have all the vocabulary and emotionally awareness, are emotionally aware about that as well. Just in case, because I was thinking about the example you gave about like how for your family, for Cassandra's family with her daughter, she can say, you have two dads and one does this and one does this, and I'm the mom. And there may be people that thinking it gets more complicated. They're prepared for that.
We're so prepared. So many of the couples we deal with are LGBTQ couples. We're also as a group really working toward being trans inclusive as well, to the point where, we're trying to emphasize even to the larger community that, sperm donors are not necessarily men and egg donors are not necessarily women, so using more trans inclusive terminology where it's a sperm provider, it's an egg provider, regardless of the gender of the person who's providing that sex cell.
Right.
We're working really hard to be inclusive of, and our moderation team as well is we have BIPOC moderators, we have LGBTQ families in the moderation team, so that we can catch any instances that turn into something that's problematic or offensive to some of our members, because we want everyone to feel at home and to realize that we are so amazingly thrilled with the rights of queer families in this country, and we want queer families to thrive. We want them to thrive. And so we want them to be as healthy as they can be. And that's why we love talking about all these things, is because we're looking for healthy families and healthy donor conceived people for the future.
Right. Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much for giving me your morning, Cassandra. It's actually your early afternoon.
Yes.
But thank you for giving me a big chunk of your day and talking with me about all this stuff. I just feel like, man, we just skimmed the surface. Like, this is just the tip of the iceberg of who Cassandra is and what she does. It's like, I want to get into everything you talked about, the retreat and how you've been facilitating, and you have this presentation now. Like, she's just full of knowledge and wisdom to share. And
I will tell you, last week was Donor Conception Awareness Day. And let me tell you, I sat on Zoom calls for over 12 hours.
Yeah,
people had stuff planned, and I only was presenting in a couple of them, but oh my gosh, there is more than 12 hours worth of information to digest on this stuff. It was even 12 hours of a day was just skimming the surface.
Yeah. So. Yeah. It just gets like, it's sort of, I don't know. I get so tired of the metaphor about the onion, the layers on the layers, but it's sort of like an infinity onion or something. It just goes and goes.
Humans are complicated. They're really, really complicated.
Humans are complicated, and donor conception is an infinity onion.
Yes.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody. So if you want to get in touch with Cassandra, contact me or go on social media and find at Everything's Relative podcast, and I will have all the information up. Can people contact you, Cassandra, directly? How would they do that?
Yes. So by email, it's Cassandra J. Adams, all one word together, at yahoo.com. You can email me. You can find me on social media, on Facebook, Cassandra Adams. If you send me a friend request or a PM, explain who you are, how you found me, or also on Instagram at Cassandra J. Adams. Again, it's a private account, but if you message me and let me know who you are, I'm more than happy to accept friend requests and follow requests from people who are willing to learn and willing to be new friends.
Yeah, cool. Oh, great. Okay, so I'll have all that information available. And so thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you go on with yourself. Have a wonderful weekend. Have a great Mother's Day, whatever that means.
Oh my gosh, yes. Happy Mother's Day.
Thanks, whatever that means to you.
Oh my gosh. I know it's complicated, but it's okay.
It's another infinity onion.
Yes. It's too much.
Infinity onions, they're everywhere. So that was wonderful. I know that I already said this, but I'm going to say it again, is that you guys, that was like nothing. That was like the tiniest hint or peek or keyhole experience of the kind of knowledge and wisdom and kindness that just exudes from Cassandra. So I really hope that you, if any of that applied to you or resonated with you, that you reach out to me or reach out to Cassandra, wherever you're at, if in donor conception or in your NPE journey. Let us know. Help us help you. And other things that might help you on your journey are, this is very silly. This is a very silly segue, you guys. But this is part of my trying this new podcast format where I keep it all in one recording. Another resource that may help you is the journal I created, the process journal called Who Even Am I Anymore? It is for everybody in the NPE community, adoptees, LDAs, donor conceived, NPEs, for everybody there. It is available on Amazon. It's got some prompts and some pages for writing. It should, I hope that it helps you. And make sure that you're following me on all the socials at Everything's Relative Podcast. I'm pretty tired. You guys, this is going to be a tough episode for my editor to work on, because what I didn't tell anybody until now I'm telling everybody, is that I am just now rounding the bend on having COVID-19. So, and actually, maybe I did tell you guys. Maybe I did tell you in an episode a couple weeks ago. See, it's the brain fog. This is the COVID brain fog. I can't even keep it straight. But anyway, so poor Cassandra and poor editor Joy, I was coughing away through this whole episode. But hopefully she edited around it so it's not too terrible. And if it is, you know what? I'll redo the whole thing with Cassandra. So everybody just let me know. And I'll be back next week. I've got more episodes. I have so many coming. This is season 4. It may never end. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing this episode or these episodes or this podcast with people you know. Thanks for reviewing me on your podcast platform. Thanks for giving me some stars. Thanks for voting. Not for me, but for the world. And all right, I'm going to fix all this later. Bye.
Everything's Relative with Eve Sturgis is produced by Eve Sturgis and Kaylin Egan and edited by Joy Rumel. Logo designed by Ivy McNally, and music is used with permission from Goodbye the Band. Eve is a licensed psychotherapist, but her podcast episodes are not therapy sessions.